Yes, everybody, there's student loans to pay and there's bills to pay and there's families to support for sure. So we have to be pursuing the financial gain of the profession, of course. But I would just caution anyone about pursuing that at the expense of feeling like you belong where you're working and where you find your work home and you're treated with respect. Because one of the biggest trends for dental hygienists and dental assistants about temping is we want to know what we're getting into, because it's a minefield sometimes, right? You see the name of an office. I don't know anything about this office. I don't know what it's going to be like. So the more transparency we can provide to say, this shift is for this office. 30 hygienists went in there and said it was friendly. 25 hygienists said that they've had good equipment, and all of them said that they're following proper infection control protocols. So you have that transparency going in to say, I don't know this office, but my colleagues have been in there and vouched for it, type of thing.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, into a special bonus episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists. And this week, it is featuring one of our favorite people in the world, Dr. James Younger from TempStars. And of course, we're going to be talking about temping. We talk about all kinds of things. And one of the things that we wanted to focus was the people that are like maybe new grads, or maybe they're new to temp work. So you're working in an office maybe for most of your career, or maybe a couple offices, and now you wanted to start doing temp work. We talk about the things that you need to be on the lookout for. We talk about ways that you can prepare yourself better for shift work, what kind of things that you might run into out there. And we also talk about sometimes temping isn't temporary. I've heard several hygienists lately are moving into doing temp work as their full-time gig. And so it's an interesting concept, and we talk a lot about that. It's always fun to have Dr. Younger on the show. He's been on multiple times before. Make sure you check him out on his other episodes. Also, be sure to go over to tempstars.com. It is free to sign up. You can check out their platform, see if it's a right fit for you. Without further ado, here is the episode.
A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome, everyone, into the interview portion of the podcast. I am so pleased to be joined by a newish co-host, Brittany. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I feel like the ones that you've been on, it's like, let's talk about our trips. Let's talk about when we went and had
Exactly.
full.
No one wants my armchair dental expertise.
No, but I feel like there's a nice little dovetail coming in. Canadian.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, he's probably your favorite guest.
For sure. And get ready for the accents.
Yeah. No, Doctor, you don't have an accent, though, really.
You know what I've been told is...
You know.
Yeah, so if I say about...
yeah.
So sometimes the word about comes out and people say. So often I'll be talking and they're like, oh, you're from Canada. And then I'll say about or out or something like
House.
that. And they're like, Canadian kind of thing. Or house.
Yeah.
Oh, so you don't have the house. You have the house.
House.
You're more Americanized.
I know, it's happened. Southern
But
twang.
welcome back to the podcast, Doctor. Always fun to talk to you.
So happy to be here. And thanks again for having me back.
Yeah, of course.
We've had such great conversations in our past interviews. And I just get so excited and engaged in what the things we talk about.
You're just the most interesting person. I mean, you're like the Dos Equis guy, like just the most interesting person in the dental world. You've done so many things. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, listeners, this is, we're going to talk about, whatever stage of your career that you're going to be in. We're going to talk about all of them, but really I want to focus on maybe the people that are maybe newer to the profession. They're searching for jobs. I know this is something that you talk about a lot. It can be confusing for people. So, what kind of advice are you giving to people as they're, looking for their home, possibly?
Right. Well, and it is especially challenging. I mean, everybody knows that in the last, say, 5 years, there's just been a real shift in terms of job market dynamics and in terms of finding what we would call your work home and the demand for good dental professionals by dental offices and things like that. So it's a trickier thing to navigate now when you have a job dynamic like that in a job market of the situation, because there's a lot of aggressive recruiting going on.
Yes.
And at the same time, that matters because everybody wants to be earning what they're worth and making a good income to support themselves and their families. But my counter message to that, to balance it, is you have to be a little bit cautious about chasing just the next dollar.
Yeah.
Because life is too short, And as a dental professional, for us, and what we try to do is just help people find their work home, to feel where you belong and that you fit in with the team, and that you fit in with the culture of the office, and that you're treated with respect, and that you're valued for what you're contributing. And so there are some situations where there's the grass is greener situation where people might go in for interviews and be recruited aggressively, and the sound of the job is embellished a bit, and so like, oh, that sounds fantastic. So you hop over and you're in there and you're like, oh, this is not quite how it was described to me.
Yeah.
And yes, there's student loans to pay, and there's bills to pay, and there's families to support for sure. So we have to be pursuing the financial gain of the profession, of course. But I would just caution anyone about pursuing that at the expense of feeling like you belong where you're working and where you find your work home and you're treated with respect. Because sometimes the office that ends up offering the highest hourly rates and the most bonuses, they could be compensating for a work environment that isn't ideal.
Yeah, yeah. And when you see that too, like we have counseled the hygienists for forever, like, hey, do an interview to the office as well. I just don't think that, words can ever describe a working environment. You really do kind of have to get in there and see what it's about. What has the shift been from, we'll say 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, until pandemic, until now? What are the needs of the hygienist, or what are they looking for? Are they chasing the dollar as much as everyone says that they're chasing the dollar?
Some are, and I'm not faulting anyone for doing that, because especially people new in their career, there's just financial realities of having student debt to pay off and bills to pay. And I was just speaking with somebody yesterday who had taken a contract for 2 years with the state government to work with homeless, which I do. I volunteer at a clinic for homeless people, and I work with people with mental health challenges and things like that. So I value that for sure. She had taken that position because for a 2-year contract, they were wiping off all of her student debt.
Wow.
And so the hourly rate necessarily wasn't quite as high, but the advantage of saying, I'll sign this contract so I don't have any student debt at the end of 2 years, but also doing really worthwhile work for the dental profession and for patients that way as well. Yeah. So there just are. I think that early in the career, sometimes people pursue the financial, the higher hour rates and the extra dollar, but it's just to, satisfy student debt and supporting themselves early in their careers. But eventually, I think you just have to be aware that if frustration is building, or you feel like you're not quite fitting in with an office, or it doesn't feel like you're treating with respect or valued there's a lot of options. And especially in this job market, there are options. Somebody doesn't necessarily have to be working in an office where they don't feel as though they're treated with respect either.
Yeah. I feel like we see a lot on the the Facebook groups and things like that there are almost careers now as being temp hygienists. They don't go in and like commit to an office anymore.
Right.
Which I think is a very interesting thing. I never really thought that as a career path. Is that you're seeing that quite often?
That comes, it is, and 100%, but it's an interesting dynamic because through full-time temping, you can earn a good hourly rate, you can feel empowered with your schedule, and really take ownership of your own career and your own pathway. From the dental profession standpoint, it can also lead to a trend of challenges of dental offices and frustrations from office owners and managers saying, it's hard to find and keep good people because everybody just wants to go out temping now, right? And they try to hire somebody, but it's hard because we have empowered people to have that flexibility for their own scheduling and to be able to make a full-time living of temping, which is great. But at the same time, it does come with a balance of there's a lot of offices who really want to find and keep and retain good people. The silver lining to that, the way I see it, and especially what COVID kind of flavored everything with, was it really did make a lot of dental office owners and managers realize how important the work experience is, right? So in those past job markets where there was an oversupply of dental hygienists who were looking for jobs, there were some dental offices who wouldn't value the work experience as much as they should have because they think, it doesn't matter, I can just hire another hygienist, that kind of thing, right? That's not the right approach. But when we run into a job market where there is a high demand for dental hygienists, sometimes, and hopefully more and more dental office owners and managers look in the mirror a little bit to say, well, what are we doing for the work experience of people working in our offices? How can we improve that? How do we retain good people? Because it's just good for business as well, because it's expensive for a lot of turnover. So they can shift the focus to just providing maybe a better work culture and treat with more respect in the dental office and that sort of thing.
Y'all do a bunch of you gather a lot of data from the offices that you work with and also from the people that you place in those offices. Have you seen, you can't just say, oh, well, they're just a nice office, and that's the office culture, they're just nice. What are some of the specific things that they're doing to enhance the environment and the culture of their offices?
Well, it really does come down to there's a revisit to office culture and how people are treating people. And so there's a shift where, we all know there's a whole spectrum of dental offices that people work at, right? And some, even before needing to take that shift, have just always treated offices or dental professionals with respect and provided a good work environment. And those are the ones that had the least struggle finding and keeping good people. But say for some offices where with a lot of turnover, well, maybe the leadership of the office would say, our office manager is not doing us any favors by being rude to everybody and frustrating people and making them feel like they're not respected in the workplace. Or the dentist might revisit their approach with their dental assistant or things like that to say, I am losing a lot of good people. Because
please help perio-chart. We need your help perio-charting.
So it does. There's a proper way to treat people, but also that's aligned now with good business for keeping and retaining good people that way.
Like concerted effort towards like teamwork and really helping each other out. It's not just about, hey, we're going to buy you a coffee every time you come in on your shift or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know one of your first tip episodes with us was about temping done right. Can you talk a little bit about you partner with not only hygienists, but also the offices and what you look for in an office to make sure that it is going to be a good fit for the people that choose Tempstars?
Yeah, absolutely. Because every single time that a shift is completed, there's what we just call a bilateral review system, right? So the dental office is asked, how happy would you be to have this dental hygienist or assistant back? And they can say very happy, or that sort of thing. And similarly, the dental hygienist and assistant is asked, how happy would you be to go back to this office? So we have a rating system that way, and certainly we have enough data to make percentage generalizations to say, these offices are in the bottom 10% of the offices that people like to work at, and we do remove those offices. We care just as much about the dental hygiene and assistant experience as we do with the office experience. But we also have the ability for hygienists and assistants to endorse an office for certain qualities. So they're asked, how friendly is this office? Does this office have good equipment? Are they following proper infection control and PPE systems? So we collect those trends and data, so there's more and more transparency when it is. One of the biggest trends for dental hygienists and dental assistants about temping is we want to know what we're getting into, because it's a minefield sometimes, right? You see the name of an office. I don't know anything about this office. I don't know what it's going to be like. So the more transparency we can provide to say, this shift is for this office. 30 hygienists went in there and said it was friendly. 25 hygienists said that they've had good equipment, and all of them said that they're following proper infection control protocols. So you have that transparency going in to say, I don't know this office, but my colleagues have been in there and vouched for it, type of thing.
Yeah.
And then similarly, we know the statistics on the other end of the spectrum to say, this office has completed 25 shifts and no one has endorsed them as having good equipment, kind of thing. And certainly our customer support team gets the feedback, and we track that as well.
Yeah, that's huge, because I've heard so many hygienists talk about bringing like their own equipment, even down to like a saddle stool. And, I'm not using this office's instruments because they haven't, been replaced since they opened.
Right.
It's a moving van worth of like equipment.
Exactly. They're like, so you're coming on with us full time? No, just here for the day.
So that brings up a really, really good point, though, because I feel like infection control, huge spike. Everyone's super aware. We just had India Chance on yesterday, and she was talking about how CDC has relaxed a lot of the guidelines that they're putting forth. Are you seeing that on like kind of the bilateral review process, that it's less important to people now, or is it still pretty darn important for everyone?
It's still top of mind now, and for us, as much as I'm sure they're not perfect, but we do just ensure that offices are following what the actual guidelines are for state and federal and regulatory guidelines. So that's kind of how we're measuring it in terms of saying, is this office following infection control guidelines according to state, province, federal guidelines? But still very top of mind, and especially during COVID. And we introduced this during COVID, but it's still, we're not removing this as a policy. But if anybody shows up at a dental office that isn't following those guidelines and they feel like, I don't want to work here, they can just leave and get paid for the full shift. We don't want anybody working at an office just for a day's pay that is following the proper infection control guidelines there. It's still very top of mind. And even in Ontario, the college there has kind of rescinded a lot of their COVID-specific guidelines, and they're back to public health guidelines as well. So,
remind me about that. So the college is the one that sets, because I feel like when we hear college, it's different than...
So our regulatory body is called the College of Dentistry, the Royal College of Dentistry. Okay. And so they certainly coordinate with medical professionals and the regulatory bodies that way, but they come up with their own guidelines for dental offices, and then they in conjunction with them, modify their guidelines accordingly. And they basically now, just a couple of days ago, said, we're just going with public health now, kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it across all of Canada, or is it just part of the region?
It's provincial. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even as we're kind of going into the different states, it's an interesting thing to navigate too, because there's certainly some state regulations, but the CDC is the big umbrella for a lot of that as well. So
Can you update us? So I feel like one of the early times we talked, like you were making your way into the U.S., you got really building up, the providers, but also the offices. I remember you told me like you had a ton of offices that wanted to, be affiliated with you, but not as much help. Where are you located now in the U.S., and kind of talk about the growth that you've seen?
Yeah, it's been incredible and just really enthusiastic growth. So now we're in Illinois, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Arizona, Idaho, and Florida.
Nice.
And so those are sort of our current markets, although, we will be across North America that way. But yeah, the response has been, as we're spreading word and as people are realizing that what we're bringing to the service and the dental profession is something that genuinely cares about making that positive impact, we're just getting a lot of people really interested and excited in working with us that way. So we have, hundreds and hundreds of dental offices and dental assistants and dental hygienists. I think at this point, we just had a press release go out last week. We've completed over 500,000 hours of temping shifts.
Holy moly.
And we work with over 20,000 hygienists and assistants and over 8,000 dental offices at this point. But 500,000 dental temping shift hours completed, and the total earned based on the invoices in our database was, I think, $25 million that we've helped dental assistants and dental hygienists earn through our temping service.
That's phenomenal.
I know.
You got to feel good about that. It's
yeah.
like good. We're making money, but you're really helping people.
Yeah. The more that we can contribute to those connections, it helps us grow. But it was a funny database pull. I'm like, I wonder what our numbers are, and I just pull. I'm like, wow, this is it's.
All right, let's get into a few more numbers because I like the stats.
Sure,
and the
yeah.
things. Okay. Are you? And look, if we need to cut this part out because it's not appropriate, that's fine. One of my biggest things, and I'm sure the listeners are tired of me talking about this all the time, is there is just a difference regionally coming from the Pacific Northwest. You go to the Midwest. You go to California by itself is just completely different as a market. Florida's completely different. Like everywhere's just so different.
Yes.
What are you seeing regionally, either when it comes to demand, Idaho versus Florida versus wherever, or on the priorities? Like what are the offices wanting more? Just talk to like the regional aspects of this.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things regionally, statewide, is there's a big diversity in qualifications and skills required for different positions, especially in dental assisting, but also in dental hygiene, depending on if someone is trained internationally or trained locally and those sorts of things. So definitely the idea of being clear about qualifications and skills and that sort of thing is important. Regionally, what a dental office is looking for, I don't think it's necessarily that different, because everybody wants a reliable, professional, skilled person working in their dental office who's going to be a good communicator, treat the patients well, and those sorts of things. From a demand and supply matching standpoint, it depends on the population density. And so in certain areas, people are more spread out. And so we end up, when we're finding dental offices and dental professionals to work, it casts a wider net to make those connections versus, say, downtown Chicago, where it's a very tight area, and people don't travel very far to work when they're in kind of a downtown metro area versus driving for 45 minutes to an hour to pick up a good shift in a different town and things like that.
Crazy Idaho.
Hey, I know. I'm so happy to hear that you're in Idaho. I'm going to have to pick your brain about practices in Boise.
Well, yeah, and I mean, do you know Brandy Hooker Evans?
Yes.
Yeah, so she was the impetus for us launching in Idaho. She's like, you have to come to Idaho.
Yes.
And so we've got a great relationship with her, and I've sponsored some of her courses, and so it was really, she was the big push to get us to launch in Idaho.
That's
so
awesome.
That's been, yeah.
Do you find there's a difference? I know in Canada you can own and manage a practice as a dental hygienist versus in the United States. Do you find that there's a difference in happiness with those offices, or what those hygienists that own the practice want? Is there like a heavier interview practice because they really know, because they're dental hygienists, what they want on the hygiene side?
They definitely, for sure, like as a dental hygienist who owns a dental practice and has the focus on dental hygiene, the request for higher quality and to ensure that you're someone who's doing proper perio is for sure there. I would say that from the demand standpoint, dental hygienists who own their own clinics don't necessarily post for as many temping shifts because they're also the practitioner doing that there. And so sometimes if they need somebody, it might be because they're sick. So whether or not they want somebody to come in and take over their day for the day. And then there's kind of smaller practices that have multiple. But it's interesting too, because anybody who starts any business runs into this realization that, and I ran into this too as an associate dentist. As an associate dentist, you think, oh, I should open my own practice. I mean, everybody, and so I hear a lot of feedback from dental hygienists that, oh, I'm working at this office. I think I'll just open up my own practice. But my goodness, there's a lot of just business realities that hit fast, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And so even my experience anecdotally is there's a reasonable number of dental hygienists who open their own independent clinics and then run them for a little while, but there's also a lot for sale because sometimes the balance and empowerment of owning your own business and all of it's kind of a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Sure.
And sometimes they'll make the transition back to say, maybe I'll go back. But dentists are the same way. I'm not paying anybody who's starting a practice where they're the practitioner kind of runs into those challenges too.
We talk a lot about business on the podcast just for that exact reason. One, I think that if you're working for a dentist, you need to understand those realities as well. I mean, you don't have to be the owner of the practice. You have to understand that this is what overhead looks like. And by the way, listeners, we are at RDH Under One Roof on the floor. They just opened up probably 15 minutes ago or whatever. That's what all the noises that you're hearing. And it sounds like they're moving someone's house over there. It's ridiculous. But I just feel like, we talk about that a lot because it's so important to be able to understand your place in the dental office. And it's not like you're less than or anything like that, but this is a big burden that we don't realize sometimes. I want to talk a little bit about dental assistants for a minute because I feel like, okay, this is totally bad, but like my experience with temp dental assistants is they're the ones that can't keep a job. They're the ones that have a bad attitude. They're the ones that roll in right at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever time you start.
Right.
Their clothes are all wrinkly. They're just not really there for the right reasons. Obviously, you guys have screening protocols in place. Tell me about the successes that you're having with the dental assistant groups versus maybe other people.
So you're kind of bang on for the previous perceptions of even temp hygienists as well, and it would be before there was kind of this ability to turn it into a lifestyle choice. It would be dental hygienists and dental assistants. They're just picking up shifts because they can't get hired somewhere.
Sure.
But I mean, as we've been growing and as Tempstars has sort of developed, even since 2015, as we're reducing the friction in those matches to allow people to make that choice without having an agency hassle them or an agency be the gatekeeper for things, people are making a lifestyle choice to do temping instead of just saying it's a default thing because I can't find a job.
Right.
And so we know, and even statistically, the satisfaction ratings for dental assistants going into shifts is just as high as for dental hygienists. And I'll tell you, for all of those, I think it's over 85,000 temping shifts now. Every one of those, the dental offices ask, how happy would you be? It's consistent. 97.1% say they're happy or very happy. And that's with assistants and with hygienists.
Nice.
So we're just as diligent about it. But there's a lot of good dental assistants out there who make a commitment to just have that flexibility, either filling in their work schedule or doing it full time. But it's harder because as a dental hygienist, within a certain sphere, you have a reasonably predictable day about what your day will look like within a scope, right?
Right.
But a dental assistant going in, never met that dentist before, don't know what the procedures are, what do they do for endo, what are they doing, am I cementing a full mouth of veneers today, are they going to be throwing instruments at me, those sorts of things. So it's fundamentally more challenging often for a dental assistant.
I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, so it takes a certain kind of personality to really gravitate towards making dental assisting temping choice as an empowerment and not a default type of thing, because you have to like that challenge of going in for the day and what are we going to do and that kind of thing.
Can you imagine trying to set up your endo? I mean, even setting up the endo tray, you don't even know where all this stuff is.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're just rifling through, now do they like this particular instrument? Do they, this? I mean, any of the oral surgery. It depends on also if your doctor is bread and butter or if they're specialty.
Exactly.
They're like, hey, by the way, we're doing implants today. You're like, I don't even know any of the instruments or the tools for an implant.
Exactly.
That's got to be really, really tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had any experience with this yet, but if you have, what kind of experience have you had with expanded function dental auxiliary? So a lot of states now are having them do, fillings like restorative or anything like that. Are you placing them yet?
So that's really interesting you mentioned that, in that we're revamping our entire system of onboarding so that people can better highlight what their skills and qualifications are so we can make those better matches.
Sure.
And so rather than just saying, here's what I have for a dental assisting license, they're able to check off to say yes. Because there's one thing about, are you qualified to do it? But there's also like, can you do it?
Yes,
Do you
yes.
want to do it, right? Like technically maybe you learned it in school, but is it something you're willing to do when you're going in for a shift type of thing, right? So again, as much transparency and clarity as we can to make those matches. So we're right in the middle, and even Holly here at Under One Roof, we're doing a little bit of user testing to test this new sign-up flow to see how clear it is so that people can highlight those things.
Yeah.
Because not every dental office would want to even use those qualifications.
Exactly.
And so it's the more clear we can make it, that even for x-rays. So there could be some dentists who might be trained internationally that maybe they can dental assist, but they can't take x-rays. And so, but maybe that's fine for some offices, maybe it's not fine for others. So if you book a dental assistant for a temping shift, you might expect them to be able to take x-rays, but if the person shows up and I can't take x-rays, there's some frustration there.
Yeah.
And so the more clarity we can bring to say, yeah, you can do dental assisting, and if you can't take x-rays, that's perfectly okay. We just highlight that in your profile so there's not a missed expectation there.
You have that for hygienists too, because in Washington,
exactly.
Oregon, all the other ones, it's, I think, I can't remember if it was you and I were talking about this before, but like we were talking about how you have this graduating class of, we'll throw out a number, we'll say 500 hygienists in Washington, 500 hygienists in Oregon, graduate with the ability to place restorations, right? Of that 1,000 between the two states, 20 are doing it.
Right.
Right? And so you want, it's on their license. It says they can do it, but they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Or they have never done it, or they haven't done it for 20 years, but there's no continuing education requirement to make sure that they keep up with that. So they're like, and then, on the opposite side, you do have offices that are running that second and third column for restorative hygiene, and then they're like, oh, well, you said your license do this, why can't you do this?
Yeah.
So I think that's a smart move.
Well, that's exactly how we're approaching it, too, because there's even things like some offices would want to know if the dental hygienist can do soft tissue laser. Some would, and airflow. Airflow is just being huge, right? But not everyone's trained on it yet. But some offices are all in for airflow, so they'd want to know, can this person do airflow, or certain whitening systems or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, 100% to build in, not only for the clarity for the dental office to know, but for dental professionals to be able to highlight the skills that not only are they qualified to do, but they feel comfortable doing and are skilled at doing.
Your brain never stops. What's next? What's the next invention? What's the next thing that you want to be passionate about going after? Dentists? Is that the next one?
Yeah. We have the temping, right? But we also have a job board. And so to be able to flesh out our job board a bit better and to interconnect them a little bit better, because when we know the great dental offices and we know the great dental professionals with solid track records, they might want to be highlighted to know when they can work together, when that office is hiring. So to be able to say, oh, I know you're not actively looking, but just so you know, this really fantastic office is now hiring, and we know that everybody likes it when you're working there, and you're a great match for them. So to really kind of flesh out and interconnect the job board a little bit more as well is a big thing that's coming.
Nice.
And it's hard for me to get into any conversation with anyone. I love AI. I've been following AI since way before it was popular, and so we're thinking of ways that we might be able to even leverage AI in terms of not only making matches, but supporting our members as well that way.
Because that would also be a huge thing. We just did an episode with another company who does AI, and it's like basically voice charting.
Yeah.
And it's not just voice charting like what we've had, in the past, where it's Barry, it's a 323, next to 323, whatever. But it's, putting in your template notes, putting in all of these different things. I think AI is like really coming on the scene hard.
Yeah.
And then also just being able to use it so there are softwares out there that will verify, I guess, kind of like, or look again at your diagnostics.
Yes.
And see if you're doing it right.
Absolutely.
But if you are a hygienist that's like doesn't know how to run that program, you're going to be, like deer in headlights. Like, what do I do? You know, that's not going to be a good fit.
No, the impact of AI is going to be huge around the world for sure, but there's certainly its places in dentistry and the impact that it's going to make there.
Still, I mean, this has nothing to do with the episode, but I just read it this morning.
Yeah.
There was a test that they had, is a math problem that they had AI doing.
Yeah.
The first time they had it run, 98% of the chance they'd get the math question right. Now, months later, only 2%.
Oh, really?
Because of all the bad input that's out there in the world as it's scraping all of the websites and seeing all of the wrong answers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, AI with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, I think for our purposes here on this episode, like, there's a lot of advancement that's going to be helpful. So.
Well, on the medical side, there's so much. My husband's a nurse practitioner, and hearing about the equipment that he uses for dictation and charting, and the fact that he's like, I don't type a thing, let alone our offices that are still using paper charts. There's a long way to come for some, but AI is going to be huge for sure.
You know how hard of a skill that would be? Maybe it's easy for both of you, but I would have a hard time being concise enough to say exactly the right words by template notes without being like, delete, backspace,
Right.
delete. Let me start again. Don't put the take out the don't put the don't put the and.
He's
My filler words.
Well, he talks like that sometimes. He's like trained himself where it's like short form now. He's
Right.
like, go to grocery store. Done. Period.
You're like, use more words.
I know. I'm like, don't talk to me. Like,
Put me in a robot.
I know, exactly.
He is the AI.
I know.
This is the Matrix.
Yeah.
All right. Doctor, thank you so much for being on with us. I would
been
love
great.
one last message for, again, new grads, recent grads, of what they should be looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting out into the profession, if you're new or early in your career, as we were talking about, Andrew, one of the things that's important is to gain a broad perspective of offices, right? Because if you're, say, go and you find and you get hired at an office, you might like the office or you might be experiencing frustration, but without a broad perspective, you don't know if, is this just the nature of the profession, or
Right.
are there other places that I might feel better at? And so we find that also with Temping and with Tempstars, that's an opportunity for people early in their career to get that broad perspective. But also key is, and in all of my research so far, I think we're the only organization that we don't charge for permanent hiring. And so a dental office, you can go and work anywhere you want. There's no exclusivity to sign. And if you find an office and they say, hey, this is fantastic, do you want a job? You can just take the job. You don't have to tell us. We're not going to send an invoice to them for $8,000 or anything like that. Take the job, find your work home, and just be happy that way. So,
Right.
yeah, I would say that's a nice approach to it. And then if you do get hired and maybe it's part-time, you can fill in the rest of your week with some flexibility for temping as well that way.
I love it. If they want to find out more about Tempstars, where can they head?
Yeah, tempstars.com. You can check us out there. It's free for dental professionals to sign up and check out shifts and that kind of.
Awesome.
And listeners, we encourage you to check out Tempstar's other episodes that we've done with Dr. Younger. We have 4 amazing tipisodes that aired February through May of 2022 about temping done right. One about how to request a raise, which is an awesome episode that Dr. Younger did, really highlighting that information about how to go about that conversation with your doctor or office manager. There's one on permission-based care, which is another great one about how to communicate with patients and really get their acceptance. And then one on should versus is. And then episode 363 was about Dr. Younger's work in a mental health facility and that kind of experience that you can have as well.
Doctor, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. It's been great.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of 2 hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of 2 hygienists.